Ladies and gentlemen, it's the one and only chief sacrificer, Mikhail Tal, against the very strong GM and chess writer, Paul Keres. Played in 73, Tal opens with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop to b5, and we have the rook on the board. Morphy's defense with a6, hitting the bishop. Bishop drops back to a4, and we get d6, the Steinitz defense. This move does three things. 1, reinforcing the e-pawn. 2, allowing the light squared bishop to join the game. And 3, it pins the knight to the king. Tal castles, bishop to d7 from Paul, unpinning the knight. We get c3, preparing to strike in the center with d4. Knight g to e7, heading for the g6 square, so this is a temporary knight move. d4 striking in the center like we said, knight to g6. Tal then develops the rook to e1 and defending the pawn, bishop to e7 preparing to castle to the king side, and Tal develops knight b to d2, which is general in this position, to swing the knight over to the king side and to go to either e3 or g3. h6, I'm not too sure what this does apart from controlling the g5 square. It's not like Tal wants to go there right away with his knight. Knight to f1, bishop to g5, and now we see the reason for h6. If white captures the bishop, then the h file opens up. We get bishop to e3 from Tal with the idea to improve his knight. If Paul takes his bishop, we get takes and castles from Paul. Bishop to c3 as b5 was looming. Rook to e8, activating the rook. Queen to d2, Tal just proceeding to connect the rooks on his side. Rook to c8, g3 from Tal, and queen to f6 from Paul, hitting the knight with tempo as the knight is undefended. So one would obviously think about moving the knight or bring the king up to disallow the knight capture, right? No, Tal plays knight to d5 and said, Paul, you can take my knight. I have another one just like it. Paul happily accepts it. Now Tal plays bishop to d1, hitting the queen. And we get the very thoughtful knight to h4 from Paul. Note, white should not capture the queen here because of the following. Say you capture and then you simply get this knight escaping and you down minus 9.5 on the bar. So going back. In the game we got takes and queen to h3, the only safe square for the queen. Knight to f6 check from Tal, and what an amazing move, which turns out to be the best move from the engine. Taking the knight ends up in a draw, so something like this. This all ends in a draw. In the game we got a king to h8, Paul playing for win, thinking Tal's king side's pawn structure is quite bad and wanting to play on. Tal takes the rook. Paul takes back and is down the exchange. h5 putting the pawn on the defended square. Bishop to g4 with a double attack on the pawn. Tal goes queen to e3, proposing a queen trade. Paul declines and takes the pawn. King to h1. We get takes and queen to h4 from Paul. Tal plays queen to f3, hitting the pawn. Paul defends with his king. Tal proceeds to activate his rook with rook to e3. Note rook to g1 looks like a nice semi-open file, but you would lose the e-pawn. Rook to f8, Tal again proposing a queen trade. Paul again declines, saying he wants to rather attack white's king, so he doesn't want to trade. Also, he's down the exchange, you know, sort of more reason not to trade pieces. f4, trying to open the center, we get takes and takes. A rook back to e8, putting pressure on the e-pawn, but it's adequately defended. A rook to g1, pinning the g-pawn and threatening to take the h-pawn. But we get king to h7 from Paul, getting out of the pin. A rook to g4, over defending the e-pawn. And knight to d8. e5 from Tal. Best move for black here is knight to e5. But Paul closes things off with d5. And Tal just continuing to apply pressure on Paul's king and threatening mate in 3. So if you're not careful over here, if you play a move like knight to e6 or rook move, for example, you are simply just a goner. So you basically take and you're getting mated. So in the game we got best move queen to f8, rook to f3, king h8, queen to f5, queen to e7, b4 from Tal, rook to f8, and now we get queen to h5, ladies and gentlemen. Knight to e6, finally improving the knight, and a beautiful rook to f6, yet another sacrifice from Tal. Now you can't take it because of mate in 1, so if you take it, I mean, you are just getting mated. So in the game we got king to h7, queen to f5 check, king to h8, and a rook to h4. You still can't take the rook because of mate in 2, so if you take that, you're basically getting mated. So we got king to g8, Tal now pinning the pawn. Knight to g5, I'm pinning the pawn to allow the rook capture. But ladies and gentlemen, another spectacular rook. H takes on h6. Tal not offering only one rook, but two rooks. But if you take either of them, you're in trouble. So for instance, if you take this one, you are just down 5.8. If you take the other rook, it's just trouble, and plus 8.1 on the bar, so you're worse off if you capture any of the rooks. In the game, we got Paul sticking his knight on the e4 outpost, but this is forced mate, ladies and gentlemen. Tal plays the best move, queen to h5, we get takes, and ladies and gentlemen, Paul resigned in this position because it's just game over. In case you wondered, the following are the best moves to continue with the forced mate. And mate, I hope you enjoyed. We're close to 1,000 subs, guys, and thanks for watching.